Greetings, I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of depth. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today, sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy, it means the world to me. I hope you know that in this moment you are valued, you are loved, and you are appreciated just as you are. As you can see, we have ourselves another solo episode. Hope y'all have been enjoying these. Let me know. Love your feedback. So today what we're going to do is I asked people to submit some questions that they want me to ask. And I didn't think ahead of in advance of how I'm going to answer them. I think it's fun to answer in the spot. But I have about 15, 20 questions y'all sent in, and I'm going to try to go through some of these that I can. We'll, of course, split them up throughout other episodes. And so the first question we have here is, what makes you feel inspired or like your best self? I love this question because it's something I'm continually thinking on, because feeling like my best self is also deeply connected to being inspired. So I know for me, one of the most important things to feeling like my best self is sleep. If I get under 8 hours of sleep, I feel it. Especially if I get under 7 hours of sleep. 7 hours, I'm there, I'm feeling good, but 8 hours is really the minimum threshold for me. And so I notice when I go a period of time without sleep, everything starts to go downhill from there. I'm not as active and inspired with Giant-Ma. I'm not as active and as inspired with Adora, with my work. And so I know that I have to really create my sleep time as sacred. Now, the thing about that has really changed since Giant-Ma's joined us in this world is she is like clockwork. She will wake up every day at 6 a.m. So there really isn't this option anymore of, well, tonight I feel like staying up until, 1 a.m. doing things that I want to do. And I'll just sleep in. If I go to bed at 1, she's going to wake up at 6 no matter what. So if I want to get 8 hours of sleep, it really means that I need to be in bed by 10. That being said, we all know we don't immediately fall asleep right at 10. So I have to get really disciplined starting around 8 p.m. and making sure I do the right steps to actually get in bed by 10. So it's something I'm always fine-tuning, seeing what can I do to make sure I'm getting that full 8 hours of sleep. So in addition to that, the other thing is going for a walk in the morning and going for a walk at night. Going for a walk in the morning is one of those critical things. It's my meditation. So I will put something on to listen to that inspires me, go for a walk, really get in the zone. That is so critical. I can feel it in the day if I skip that walk. And then the walk at night really allows me to just unwind from the day. So those two are really important. Being around nature, getting the opportunity to not just see buildings everywhere, helps me feel inspired and like my best self. Now, interestingly enough, or if that's even the right phrase, one thing about inspiration is I believe that inspiration is a practice. Now, especially around creativity, this is one of the things I'm continually talking about, is there's this myth that inspiration or the muse will strike and you'll get it. This is what I'm talking. This is what I should be saying. This is what I should be creating. When inspiration is a practice, I need to just sit down and be able to create. And so, oftentimes I'll have multiple presentations or pieces of content or projects that I'll need to be working on, and they're on a deadline. There is a project schedule, production schedule. There's the phrase, there is a production schedule for each. And if I'm not feeling inspired, it's really not going to cut it. It doesn't matter if I'm feeling inspired. This next piece of the production needs to be completed by tomorrow. It doesn't matter if you're inspired or not, Tom. And so it still needs to be work that comes from a place of inspiration, that is creative, that is meaningful, all of those things. So here's a couple things that I do to tap into the inspiration when I'm not feeling inspired. What I'll do, this is something I learned from Deep Work by Cal Newport. Great book. We'll cover it here one time on the show. So what I'll do is I'll pick a song that's an instrumental, usually some like new age classical music, if you will. And by that, it's more like piano, atmospheric sounds rather than, an orchestra. Or I'll do some lo-fi hip hop, and I'll pick one song and put that song on a loop. And then I'll go for a walk and have that song on a loop. And then I'll have Evernote, that's where I take notes on, pulled up on my phone. And this is where I learned from Deep Work, is you think about one problem that you want to solve, and you only think about that one problem. Now, normally what happens is we go on these walks, or we try to think about one problem, and I'll be thinking, okay, let's say I need to do a presentation on, copywriting, how to create meaningful copy that converts strangers into customers. Okay, that's the name of the presentation. What do I want to talk about? Now, normally what happens is you go out, I'm going to think about what I want this presentation to be. And as you're walking, you start thinking about it, but then you think, oh, I totally forgot to email so-and-so. Oh, I totally forgot. And then your mind starts going in a million directions. You might even just, if I'm walking, pull over to the side of the road and just start doing other tasks. And so the discipline, they say it's simple, not easy. So it sounds simple. Go for a walk. Just think about one problem. Simple, not easy, because our minds like to wander. So I've been working on this strategy for probably about 6 months, and I'm getting better and better at it. And so if you discipline your mind to just think about this one problem, this is what I do. So I think about it deeply, okay? And I think about it. If anything's come up for me, I write them down, anything like that. Now, let me jump back. Usually I'm doing this, and the reason I put out production schedules is so that I can give myself time to do this process. So if I know I'm going to do a presentation is due, let's say 3 weeks from now. I have to create a presentation 3 weeks from now. I will then go on this walk 3 weeks out, and I'll think deeply about it. And I'll get all the ideas onto a piece of paper that I believe I'm going to talk about. And then what I do is I go completely blank. I let go of the problem completely, and I don't think about that problem for a day or two. And what'll happen in that day or two when I stop thinking about it and just release it is I will see something, I'll hear something, I'll read something, I'll experience something where my mind will go, oh, I think that could work for the presentation we were thinking about the other day. And I'll just write it down real quick, and then I'll stop thinking about it. And what happens in that interim, when I think deeply and then I let it go and just get relaxed, is I get all of this synergy, all of these really great ideas, and I write them down. And then what I do is now I sit down on my computer and I look at all these different ideas I have, and I'll start to put them in an order of what I think the presentation could be. Now, normally what I usually do is I start off with, if it's supposed to be an hour presentation, I usually start off with 2 or 3 hours worth of ideas. So I look at it and I start to think, okay, I start to give it a little bit more structure. Then what I do again is I bless and release it, and then I go on a walk again, and I go back and I actively think about it, and I start trying to say the presentation in my mind and see, will this connect? How will this? How will that? And usually on that second walk, after I've done the first walk where I think deeply about it, I let it go, write down more ideas that come up, and then I, get on a computer and look at what I have, try to organize it. Then I go on one more walk, and I really almost get the full final draft on that walk. And usually what I'm doing too is I'm voice dictating what I think I'm going to say, because I go through the presentation in my mind. Hey, here's this, okay, and then I start to give my example, start to go through it. By that point, it's pretty much done. So then I go, I give myself some space, but then I sit back down at the computer again. And then what I do, because my big problem is when people say, can you do an hour in presentation? I usually show up with 2-hour presentation. I just always want to over deliver. So what I've been working really hard on doing is, if they want an hour presentation, I create a 45-minute presentation so that I'm not stressed looking at the clock like, oh man, I'm taking longer here than normal. I'm taking longer here than normal. I'm going to go over time. So it gives me that space to go about 15 minutes longer. Curiously enough, it looks like this question has turned into, how do you create your art. And right now, the art that I'm mostly creating is presentations using slide decks. Personally, I believe if I can toot my own horn, that I've become really, really good at this. I'm really proud of the art that I create, the art of the presentation. So let me finish this story for you. For those of you who are enjoying this and still here with me, haven't been like, wow, this is boring. I don't want to hear about your presentations, Tom. So then the second stage, if that's the first stage, everything I just described, the second stage is actually turning the presentation into a slide deck. Now, let me give you just a couple tips. If you right now, when you create slides, have a bunch of words or bullet points or anything like that on your slides, it's not the right way to do it. There's a great YouTube video out there called Death by PowerPoint. I want you to check it out. Great TED Talk. That'll totally change your mind if you're doing those kind of things. What I do for my PowerPoints, if you will, and I use Canva to create my PowerPoints, so I use storytelling to teach things. So usually what I have is 5 points I want people to learn, and then I come up with 5 stories to illustrate each of those points. So for each story, let's say it'll take me 3 minutes to tell the story. What I'll do is I will have a picture that I'll use to illustrate the story, but I'll basically change slides every 15 seconds. So let's say it's 3 minutes, 15 seconds, that means 4 times 3, 12. I'll have 12 slides that I'll go through in 3 minutes because I want to visually, illustrate it through visuals. I don't want people reading. I want it to just accent, not take away from what I'm telling them. So usually once I start to, pick the slides, pick the images that I want, I sometimes get new ideas or things become clear when I actually start putting it all together. And admittedly, sometimes what will happen is I will spend 10, 15 minutes trying to find the perfect photo. And this could take a long time when I create it because usually if I'm going to do an hour presentation, my slide deck is going to be about 180 slides. And for sometimes, even if I'm only going to spend 15 seconds on a slide, I just want it to be so intentional. Not perfect, but intentional. So it is worth it to me to spend 10 minutes on one slide because I'm always trying to think, how can I switch up the pattern? How can I pull someone in who momentarily their mind went somewhere else? Oh, did I leave this on? Oh, is this, what about this? Oh, and then I show that perfect picture that pulls them back in. Oh, wait, what's that? Let me listen to what this person's saying. So that's kind of the, I'd say, second phase is taking what I have on paper and turning it into a visual experience. Now, the third and final stage is then when I practice it. I used to improv, I create my slide deck, I'm good to go, and then I used to deliver it just like that. But I had the opportunity to do this presentation for a group that was one of those career make or break moments. So it was somebody in my industry that is really well known, like millionaire, all these things, hashtag goals. She's super well known. So she gave me the opportunity to do a presentation to her group. And it was one of those things where if I impress her, it's going to open up doors. And if I impress her community, it's going to open up doors. So it was one of those moments where, what's the 8 Mile song? You only get one chance to break. I don't know. Insert Eminem song right here, Lose Yourself. Okay, so I, for the first time, practiced my presentation before delivering it. And I did that for my TED Talks that I did. But this was one that wasn't, I guess, a TED Talk that I did it for. And what I found was practicing it became the third phase of creating a presentation. Because when I'd start to say it out loud and I'd time myself to see how long the presentation was, I'd start to notice, okay, this isn't quite nailing it. I can be more clear here. Because that's my thing. I want to be super, super clear, and I want it to be experiential through storytelling. Those are my big things that I want. And so that becomes the third phase, is in the practicing, I'll realize, okay, I need to add a transition here, or this story is too long, or this story is too short, or I need to cut this out. And I like to practice my presentations 3 times because I do it the first time, And I'm usually pausing every 2 or 3 minutes to make a note, to change something out, add something in. Okay, cool. I do that. Usually if it's an hour presentation, it'll take me about 2.5 hours to practice that first time because I'm pausing, I'm adjusting, I'm adding, I'm subtracting. Second time around, a little more smooth. If it's an hour presentation and it took me 2.5 hours before, it'll take me about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, maybe an hour and 15 minutes on that second time. But once I get through that second time, it's basically 99.9% done. So then the third time is really like the dress rehearsal. I'm not going to add anything. I really want to see how long this is. And then I go through and pretty much there's almost nothing that I change. If there is something I change or there's a decent amount of things that I change, then I'll try to squeeze in a fourth practice session. Now, as you can hear, this takes a lot of work. This takes a lot of time. There was a group that I was doing a presentation for where they asked me to do a presentation on using the power of storytelling in Facebook ads to convert strangers into customers. And it was a really big opportunity. And basically what I had to do is clear my schedule completely and just focus on this. One of the episodes that's coming out, I'm not sure when I record these, I don't know the order they're coming out. So you might have already listened to it. It might be coming out where I review Greg McKeown's Effortless book and also his book Essentialism. And also the episodes I have out on burnout, where I talk about that one of the most important things that we can do to really do work that matters is to be realistic about the time that we actually have. And so if I try to create these presentations while also doing everything else I normally do, it's not going to happen. So what I really have to do, this is why production schedules are so important and why we can't wait for inspiration to come to us. We have to stick to the schedule and find a process that allows us to create on demand. I'm explaining to you my process right now. So what I do when these presentations come up is I just plan ahead that I know that for 2 weeks, this will be my number one priority every single day for 2 weeks. Now, this presentation I did, it at points became a pain in my neck. I mean, practicing the same presentation 4 times, y'all, I had to force myself. I had to be like, no, you sit down. You're going to spend this next hour doing it. You have to. I mean, there's moments where I was like, come on, is this even worth it? I mean, 2 full weeks of my life. Now, it was worth it for one, from a creative standpoint. It was one of the best presentations I've ever done. I mean, when I say presentation, y'all, I want you to think, if I can toot my own horn, this experiential story, you're pulled in. I mean, it was a performance. It was art. I was very proud of it and people were blown away. It was awesome. So from that standpoint, I got a lot out of that. That was awesome. I love performing, whether it's a poem, a song. I love bringing people into a process and seeing them get excited. So I got that out of it. And I wouldn't have got that had I not put in that work. From a financial standpoint, I ended up making $60,000, $70,000 off that presentation. So, I mean, from the customers I got coming in off it. So 2 weeks of work if I can toot my own horn. So for all of us, it might not be as clear cut as what I just described, but I had to build up to that. I had to create these processes through trial and error and figuring it out. This is what works for me. This is how to create on demand. Y'all, this is why I'm the worst. This is why I'm like, I have 17 questions. Let's see which ones I can get through. Oh, let me go off on a tangent and take almost 20 minutes to answer this one question. So I hope that y'all were looking forward to seeing what inspires you, what can make your best self, and obviously how to create fun presentations. Okay, let's see what else we have time for. What stresses you out and how do you manage it? Okay, this one's interesting. Do you know what stresses me out? Is time. Time stresses me out. And there's a couple ways. One is when I'm going to be late for someone or for something. Stresses me out. Whew. How do you manage it? Let's just start there. How do you manage it is knowing where does this come from? Okay, a lot of things that I'm realizing through the work I do on myself, through workshops I do, books I listen to, journaling, and most importantly, therapy, is that perfectionism sneaks its way into my life through like the back door. So maybe through the subconscious. Perfectionism is something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about, a lot of time working on. For example, with the presentations I was just talking about, I know to create it on a production schedule. I know to keep my sanity. It can't be perfect, right? I can't just keep recreating the slide deck and this. And even with the photo that I was saying, sometimes I'll spend 10 minutes on one photo, but then on the next one, I'll spend 15 seconds picking them, because I know if it has to be perfect, it's not going to get done. So I know a lot of those things, but there's a lot of subconscious, I've been realizing, perfectionism that sneaks its way into there. And so what I do to manage that stress is recognize what is the story that I'm telling myself. And so with if I'm late, it is the story that I tell myself is it's disrespectful. If I'm late, it shows that I am disrespectful. If I'm late, it shows that I don't take this serious. It shows I'm not serious. Therefore, this is where we have to trace back our stories. We have to keep going. There's this, I don't know if it's Toyota. It's one of these big companies. They have a strategy called the 5 whys. We ask yourself why 5 times. So if I was to say, well, why am I stressful? Where does this come from? Well, it's because I think people are going to feel disrespected. So then they'll think maybe I'm disrespectful, or they'll think this. So they're going to think I'm that. Okay, that's the first level of why. Let's go back. Okay, why does that matter? Well, then they aren't going to like me. It's going to look like I'm not a good person. Well, why does that matter? Well, if I'm not a good person, then I'm unworthy. Okay, why does that matter? Well, if you don't have your worthiness, you're not going to be loved. You are going to be rejected and ridiculed. All of these things, right? If you ask yourself the 5 whys, it's almost always going to come back to, and no one will love me, and I have no worthiness. So I have connected that this stress, I used to get so bad about it that if we were going to be late, I would just make everybody's lives around me miserable. Like, we're going to be late, oh my gosh. And the whole drive there, I'm just tense. Oh. So for one, I try to plan better when I can, but inevitably things are going to happen, right? And so how I manage that is I become mindful of what is this story that is influencing this reaction that I'm having, and to connect it and to remind myself, you don't have to be perfect to be loved, because you are loved just as you are. And so to really name it, so when I can name, this is the story, this is the script that's creating this reaction, that helps. Now, around the time management of to-dos and things like that, I keep saying this word production schedule, because having a plan and getting very, 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 very clear on how much time you actually have makes such a difference. I talk about this on other episodes. There's this thing called the planning fallacy that I learned from Greg McEwen, where we say to ourselves, okay, this thing is probably going to this thing realistically, if I'm totally realistic, takes 3 hours. I only have 45 minutes. We then say to ourselves, I can do this. I will make it happen. And we get so stressed because it's totally impossible to do that. I used to do that a lot in my business, and therefore it bleed over into my personal life, where I'd have, let's say, 15 to-dos. And if I was to add them up, these 15 to-dos are going to take probably about 19 hours. And I would have 7 hours in the day, and I'd say to myself, I'm going to get all of these done. And inevitably, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them are going to take longer even than I anticipated. And someone's going to need something I didn't anticipate. This thing's going to happen. This thing's going to happen. And it would just stress me the heck out. I'd be like, ugh. It was crazy. It still happens sometimes, but it was crazy. And I used to just resent any surprises. And I would resent the person that would create the surprise. How did I manage that? Going back to the same thing. recognizing that my output, my doing, all of those kind of things, how much I get done is not linked to my self-worth, is not linked to who I am as a person, is not linked to my worthiness. Working on that script. Then from a time management, from a production management schedule, it was getting very, very honest on how long something realistically is going to take, and then being like, and then adding some time. So I'm like, this will take 3 hours, being totally realistic. Okay, let's say 4 hours just to be safe. Okay, this thing's going to take 4 hours. And then I go through all of my to-dos and I realistically say, this is how long it's going to take with buffer. So then I will say, I realistically I should take a lunch break. I'm going to end by 5 o'clock so I can play with Jayama. I'm not going to start the day until 9:30 so I can play with her in the morning. With the lunch break, we're looking at you have 7 hours of work. Of these to-dos that add up to 30 hours, what are the 1 or 2 that you are going to aim to get done today? And that's how, when I started to plan my day like that, even today, there are 4 major projects I want to get done. And I know that I need to finish recording the last of my personal episodes for this next season of the podcast. I think I've mentioned it before. Right now, I'm recording about 24 episodes in 2 weeks. I go in depth on why in another episode. So I know I need to record. Right now, this is my first of 4 episodes I need to record before I take my lunch break. So basically, that's going to take 4 episodes. It'll take me about 45 minutes to record each of them. What is that? I don't know. Let's say 3.5 hours. So if my day is 7 hours, 3.5, I have less than 4 hours. I don't know what that adds up to. So these other projects I want to do are probably also each about a 3-hour project. So what I used to do in the past is say, okay, I have 3 projects that'll probably take about 3.5, 4 hours each. I have a 7-hour day. I can do it. I can get all 3 done. And then I wouldn't. And it stressed me out. And if my day was ending at 5, about 4 o'clock, I would feel this pressure on my shoulders, this tenseness. I'd feel so stressed. 5 o'clock would come and go. I'd find myself in the bathroom, going to the bathroom way longer than I actually am because I'm on my phone and still working. I'm taking my evening walk, trying to relax, and I find myself sitting on a park bench, still working. All of these kind of unhealthy, terrible boundaries things. And so what I've done instead is gone to the system, gone to the root of it, and gotten clear on how much time I actually have. Another long-winded answer for y'all. All right, looks like we have time for one more. What type of music are you into? This is a fun one. The music that I listen to the most is what's called lo-fi hip-hop or chill hop. For my folks who know of it, we are diehards. If you haven't heard of it, picture very kind of calming, instrumental hip-hop music, atmospheric. It's very relaxing, and it's instrumental. I can't, when I'm working, so that's when I listen to most of my music, is when I'm working. I can't listen to anything that has a melody or vocals, even if it's in another language. So I've tried listening to like Arabic music, French music, lots of different languages while I'm working, and the melody, the vocals, even if I don't understand the words, just pull me in, and I find myself concentrating more on the music than on what I'm doing, right? So I start multitasking in my brain, and we know multitasking is the enemy of progress. The other thing that I experimented with is listening to jazz because I love jazz, while I was working. Now, when I was in college for 2.5 years, I was a jazz major. And it was one of the exercises we had to do is at the time was iPods. At that time, we were listening to iPods. So for those of you who don't know what an iPod is, it's basically your phone, but the only thing on it is music. Hilarious. So what we had to do was delete every kind of music from our iPod except for jazz. So they wanted us to just listen to jazz 24/7 all the time. The whole reason being is, if I was to say to you right now, let's pick a song. Okay, if I was to say to you, it's tearing up my heart when I'm with you, but when we are apart, I feel it too. Anybody who grew up in the same time period I did, y'all can probably sing the rest of that song. Okay, let's pick another one. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I bet most of you can finish that song. Okay, the reason being is when I start something, it is in your head. You know that melody, so you can probably sing the next couple of words. They wanted us to have that with jazz. They wanted us to get those jazz melodies locked into our brains. All that to say, I love listening to jazz, but I can't do it while I'm working because my mind now has been trained to actively listen and dissect what's going on in jazz. All that to say, I like to listen to lo-fi hip-hop. I like to listen to modern classical. That's more what I call it, where it's not like orchestras and stuff, but piano, maybe some strings, a little more atmospheric. That kind of stuff is what I like to listen to. Then what I listen to with Jayama is we have this playlist of songs that she really likes that are mainly like 60s and 70s rock. Rolling Stones, Beatles, Bob Seger. And then it's mixed in with more, I don't know what you call it, neo-soul. So it's like Erykah Badu, Janelle Monáe, Lauren Vula, Lianne La Havas, Solange, Beyonce. So that's kind of, those two genres are usually mixed onto a playlist. And that's usually what Jayama and I are listening to when we're in the car. There are many songs she actually can now sing along to, where you'll hear her singing the melody. It's quite extraordinary. And then in the morning, when her and I are like eating together and stuff, we listen to more mellow music, like Lianne La Havas, Lauren Vula, that kind of music that's a little more mellow but beautiful singing and stuff like that. So that is the kind of music that I'm into. When I go for a run, I like to listen to punk rock, Rage Against the Machine, Tupac, stuff that gets you fired up. So that's the kind of music that I am listening to, y'all. And it looks like we only had time for 3 questions because I'm long-winded. I don't know if you've seen, maybe about 2 years ago at this point, I did a Q&A episode with Adora where she had the questions in front of her. And I wouldn't see them ahead of time, and she'd ask me them, and she would start to kick me, and that was her hint that I'm going on too long on one question, and we're not going to get to the other questions unless I wrap it up. So it's kind of fun. I'm in this room by myself, no one here to tell me to hurry up. So hopefully y'all enjoyed me going deep on 3 rather than shallow on 10. Let me know though. I'd love to hear your thoughts. At Tom Earl Artist, tom@tomearl.com. If you'd like to know how we manage our production schedules, if you'd like to know how to use Facebook ads, YouTube ads, Instagram ads to intentionally build a community to turn strangers into raving customers, I do have some free resources for you can find by going to tomearl.me/ads, tomearl.me/ads. My friends, this has been an extraordinary blast hanging out with you. My invitation to you is to answer that first question. What has you feeling inspired and like your best self? What are the rituals, the routines, the systems, the patterns that you're already doing that you need to double down on, or that you need to create a structure that creates a process that becomes automatic and helping you to live those things that allow you to be your best self and to be inspired. Don't leave inspiration up to chance, up to whims. Create a structure and the discipline that continually infuses your day with that inspiration. I appreciate you all. Look forward to seeing you next week. As always, I'm wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.